I don't think we need to be out there, I guess, pointing out every bad thing about people. If you see, a woman on the street with some crazy hairdo, you don't need to necessarily point it out to her and tell her about it, but just be authentic and be your true self. I think it comes through in stand-up comedy. It would probably be better if all of us were a little bit more authentic and not putting up a front.
Welcome to the Radically Christian Podcast. I'm your host, Wes McAdams. Here we have one goal: learn to love like Jesus. My guest today is stand-up comedian Brian Bates. Brian is a member of the Harpeth Hills Church of Christ in Brentwood, Tennessee, but you might know him as the co-host of Nate Bargatze's podcast, the Nateland Podcast. I am a big fan of the Nateland Podcast, so it was quite a treat for me to visit with Brian. We talked about being a Christian in the entertainment industry, the rise of clean comedy, as well as what preachers and Christians can learn about communication from stand-up comedians. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. And if you enjoy clean entertainment, you might also want to check out VidAngel. It works with Apple TV Plus, Netflix, Amazon Prime, Peacock, and other streaming services. It skips and mutes all the inappropriate stuff and allows you to enjoy the story without all of that garbage. And because you listen to this podcast, you can get an extended free trial by using the promo code RADICALLY when you sign up. Or you can just go to radicallychristian.com/vidangel and follow the link on that page. Okay, now my conversation with stand-up comedian Brian Bates. Brian Bates, welcome to the podcast, brother.
Thank you for having me.
Oh,
Glad to be here.
thanks for doing this. I'm incredibly excited. I'm sure there are a lot of people that are listening that know you already, but for those who don't, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I'm a stand-up comedian based here in Nashville, Tennessee, and I've been doing stand-up comedy for about 18 years now. So I got into it a little late in life, but because I'm 53, but yeah, I've been doing stand-up comedy for 18 years. The last 10 or so full-time stand-up comedy. In the last 5 years, I've been doing a podcast with Nate Bargatze called Nateland, and that's how most people know me.
Well, I listen to the podcast all the time, and I told you before we hit record that I'm feeling a little starstruck. I feel like I know you already. I feel like we've had all kinds of conversations, but I love the podcast. One of my favorite things of any of the guys on the podcast, one of my favorite recurring segments is when you do impressions. That's one of my favorite things.
Yeah, that's been a fun running gag, and I'll sometimes do it during my shows. I'll take requests, and for those who don't know me or wonder about that, I cannot do impressions at all. So I just pretend like I'm good at impressions and go with it. It's funny.
It is hilarious. In fact, I would love for you to describe, for those that haven't listened to the podcast or those that haven't seen your stand-up, how would you describe your style of comedy?
Yeah, it's very self-deprecating, low energy, um, observational of things that are going on in my life. And when I first started stand-up comedy, I've always been self-deprecating. It just seems to fit me naturally. But when I first started stand-up comedy and I wasn't very good, um, I had so much self-deprecating material, and it wasn't good enough to the point where sometimes I felt like the audience was feeling sorry for me instead of laughing with me. And over time, as I got better as a comedian, I figured out I can still be self-deprecating, but not make me look so sad, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I should have said this before we started recording that I promised my family when I told them that I was going to be visiting with you. I promised them that I would not try to say anything funny. So I need you to keep me in line. If I keep me in my lane, if I try to tell a joke, to Wes, stick to
I'll
preaching.
try to. Okay.
You do the comedy, I'll do the preaching. I feel like, and I'm curious if you have the same feeling, but I feel like clean comedy right now is kind of having a moment, and it seems to be pretty popular. Do you think that's true? And if so, why do you think that's the case right now?
Yes, I definitely think that's true. Hmm. I don't know. I suspect maybe and I would love your thoughts on this as well. Over the last however many years, we've gotten progressively less clean, and to the point where finally it's more cool and niche to do something clean. It's like it's coming back around to the other direction because people have taken it so far, and it's become so prevalent to do dirty comedy or edgy comedy, and of course, there's still plenty of that out there, and that's fine, but, it's now kind of a new thing to be clean, I think, and it's kind of you know, built some momentum, and I really feel like a big part of it right now is because of Nate Bargatze. Nate is a clean comedian, and he's also the number 1 comedian in the world right now, uh, so he's leading the charge for sure, but then there's so many other really great clean comedians that are coming along as well. I
Yeah.
hope it continues.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is kind of an interesting cultural moment that we're in because I don't feel like, and maybe this is being cynical, but I don't feel like people in general are necessarily nicer or that we're having a moment of kindness and love and generosity, that kind of thing. I feel like people are generally kind of mean and rude to each other and that people don't mind just, saying all kinds of horrible things to each other, especially online. But so it's interesting that we are gravitating towards clean comedy, and maybe that's why. Maybe clean comedy is sort of this medicine that we need. Like we need a break from all the hostility and all of the anger and all of the just cruel nature. And so when you listen to somebody like you or like Nate, and you hear that, it's refreshing. And like you said, in a world that has been edgy and dirty and mean spirited.
Yeah, no, obviously very political, no matter what side you're on. So I really feel like in Nate's case, and mine as well, and people they get their fill of politics. So when things got so political over the last decade or so, and then COVID hit, people just wanted an outlet other than just bad news or divisive news and things like that. So the fact that not only are we clean, we're also non-political, I think really helped as well. Although I know some clean comedians who still share their politics, but that in my case, I feel like in Nate's case and some of the other people I'm thinking of, it's really helped to just give people an escape from all the stuff that we see in the news and online.
Yeah. And that's what, going back to the idea of your self-deprecating humor, really, and when I listen to the podcast as well, you guys will tease each other, and I appreciate that and enjoy that too. But nobody is mean-spirited and cruel. And if you're teasing someone, you're usually teasing yourself as much as you are anybody else. And man, I think that's refreshing too. So sometimes when we talk about clean comedy, we're just talking about, it doesn't have any profanity in it, but sometimes it could still be cruel, but you guys are not
Mhm.
cruel, and I think that's really what what the world needs right now.
Yeah, certainly in our acts on stage, I don't think any of us, oh, I know we're not cruel to anyone. We're probably cruelest to ourselves, yeah, on stage. And in the podcast, we're certainly can be pretty hard on each other, but it's all about intent, like you
Yeah.
said. And if it's not coming from a mean place, a mean spirited place, then, and I think audiences can pick up on that, then, it's all in good fun.
Yeah. Well, I one of the things that I love to hear on the podcast is some of the people that you meet. In fact, Nate has been filming a movie. Well, you guys all have been filming a movie, and you interviewed some of the stars from that movie. I heard about how you ran into Christian Bale at the airport, and so
Yeah.
you've met a lot of interesting people. And I imagine I'd love to hear any stories you have about that, but also just like what has being in this world of entertainment and comedy, like, what has it taught you about people and humanity?
Hmm. Well, I haven't been to all 50 states, but I've been to a bunch of them, performing stand-up comedy, and I find, and again, maybe it's just because the type of comedy I do, which is not political, not edgy. We're all kind of have the same needs out there, whether you're a red state, a blue state, up north, down south, wherever in the country, we all have a lot in common, and, I guess that's what I find. We all have the same struggles, the same, things we're going through in life, and if we can all laugh together, I think just it makes the world a better place.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. N- let's talk specifically about faith and about how your faith plays into comedy.
Yeah.
I I'm thinking about the words faithful and funny, and sometimes there's a tension there probably and a
Oh, yeah.
line, both in, like, what we say, but also how we say it, and like we were talking about being nice or, you know, doing something that is at somebody else's expense. Like, where do you find that line between maybe something would be funny, it would get a laugh, but that
Yeah,
might not be the guy you wanna be, that and may not be the kind of humor that you want to promote. So, how have
right.
you determined where that line is for you and when you don't wanna cross that line?
Yeah, I'm not always right. I have a pretty good feel of now of where that line is, but sometimes I'm wrong, and I was, more wrong when I was newer into comedy. I've always been a clean comedian, so I haven't really crossed the line anywhere as far as being dirty. I have been, where I worry about crossing the line, well, there's a couple areas. I do perform in churches, and I I tell some jokes about my wife, and I tell some jokes about my church. And I've now started my set when I perform at a church telling them, "Hey guys, I tell some jokes about my wife, but she's heard these jokes and she likes these jokes, so it's okay to laugh at them." And the same with my church. Because sometimes I find churches in particular, like they're a little afraid to laugh. Should I be laughing at this? This maybe seems mean or mean-spirited. So I guess I have to sometimes in that case, I'll just tell them up front, "It's okay, guys. My wife likes these jokes." Um, I do sometimes I share my faith on stage, not like a testimonial necessarily, but I do let people know I'm a Christian, and I have jokes about, being a Christian, and I sometimes do worry that if about crossing the line where the people in the club think I'm making fun of Christians. Because I kinda am, but in a way, like, because I'm one of them and not in a mean-spirited, like, "Oh, yeah, those Christians, you tell them." You know what I mean? I don't want, people to think I'm somehow putting down Christianity. I'm making fun of some of the things we as humans do it as a Christian and in a church setting. And I have a joke about, a homeless guy that I stopped at a red light and, I didn't wanna give him money, and then the car in front of me prayed with him, and, um, I it made me happy because I thought if this prayer lasts long enough, that light will turn green and I won't have to deal with this guy, and then I end up having to honk the horn. And it's just a funny joke, but I just won't I don't want anyone to ever think like, "Oh, he's, making fun of Christianity, making fun of the faith," anything like that. So sometimes I'm wrong. I've done shows in churches. There's one in particular I'm thinking about where it was for a married, I can't remember what the program was, but it was just for married couples. It was like a Valentine's program or something. This was probably 5 years ago, and I told a joke or 2 about my wife that was a little bit edgier than I should have told, especially for a church setting. And the only reason I even did it was because it was only adults and it was just married couples there. But the person who hired me let me know, like, "Hey, we got a couple of complaints about that." And I felt really bad about that because, I don't want anyone to be upset and they took their trust in me. So, I have made mistakes and crossed the line.
Well, I think we all have, and I think that applies that question of not just in comedy, but in every area of our life. Like, where's that line? And
Yeah.
and we don't want to do anything to step over that line. But at the same time, we have, and we all have made mistakes or we've misjudged things. But we all want to be funny. We want to be liked. We want to say things that are a little bit shocking or get attention or whatever the case may be. And then in hindsight, we may think, "Oh, I took that too far." I never have an interaction. I'm sure even this interaction right now, I will think back and I'll be like, "Oh, why did I say that to Brian Bates of all people? I can't believe I said that." And I'll always regret things that I say. And so I think that's something that we all have to sort of wrestle with.
Yeah, especially in the moment in real time. I'm the same way. When our podcast every week driving home, I replay it in my head and I only think about the bad. And I think, why did I say that? Or I shouldn't have said that. And, uh, there was something last week where I started texting Aaron Weber, who's also on the podcast, to say, "Hey, I'm sorry I said that. I shouldn't have said that to you." I actually did not send the text. I'm like, "Oh, Brian, Aaron doesn't care." But I felt a little bad about it. So yeah, we all, you know, replay things in our head, and usually it's for me, it's in the shower or or in the car ride where I give my brain time to think.
Yeah. Well, and that's I think that that's really healthy to even just talk about and, to give ourselves grace and understand that God is gracious with us and we're human and we make mistakes and to know that everybody does that. Everybody is sort of both, saying things that they regret later, but also second guessing themselves. And
Me
so many
too.
times somebody will say to me, "Hey Wes, I hope I didn't offend you when I said such and such." And I think I didn't think about that twice. It didn't even cross
Right.
my mind. But I think that sensitivity and wanting to be sensitive to people and caring how we come across, I think that's important.
Yeah, when people say it to me, even if I wasn't offended, I appreciate
Yeah.
them saying it, and it makes me think more of them. So yeah, I appreciate it. I'm sure they probably appreciate it too.
Yeah, for sure. Let's talk about this idea of ministry. I tend to think that every Christian is a minister. Like everything that we do should be
Yeah,
and ministry just meaning service, like serving people. I think so often we just think about ministry as in church staff and people that work at a church. Now
right.
you said that you do comedy in churches and so there is part of what you do that's in churches, but so much of it like, even in comedy clubs and places that are not necessarily a Christian, quote, unquote, "environment,"
Yeah,
do you think of your work as a type of ministry?
I do, and I hope that doesn't come off as sounding pretentious, but like you said, I think we are all ministers in a way. And I remember a few years ago at church in our Sunday school class. The guy leading the class was we were talking about evangelizing to those around us, and he said, find somebody at your work this week that is not a Christian, and start a dialogue with them, and things like that. And I realized, just based on the conversation, there are so many people who either, like in my family's case, not only is everyone they work with Christian, they're all Church of Christ. So they all, have the same general beliefs. Most of us either we're in a workplace where we got to be careful what we say because we could get called into HR and could get fired, or we're around a lot of the same like-minded people. I know at comedy clubs there's people there of all sorts that are hurting, and uh many, if not most of them, are not Christian, especially when I'm other parts of the country where Christianity, or at least churchgoers, is not as prevalent. So I like to um, share my faith. And that's where, again, I have to be careful about some of my jokes because I don't want them to come off as like, oh, yeah, Christianity's dumb, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Something like that. It is a fine line that even I sometimes am trying to figure out.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think that what you guys do, like even listening to the podcast, I mean, you do every now and then matters of faith will come up, but I think that even just making the world a kinder place or
Oh,
giving people a positive impression of faith-filled people is really important in our day and age. And I imagine, I don't know, but have there been times where people have shared with you that your comedy or other comedians has made a difference in their life? I can't help but think that there's gotta be so many people, like you said, that are hurting and going through difficult times and just brightening their day and helping them to smile is a type of ministry.
absolutely, absolutely. I get, a lot of messages on social media, but I also, I check the emails for our podcast, for the Nateland podcast. So we get so many emails from people that are telling us about something they're going through in their life. They've lost a loved one. They're uh, recovering from alcoholism. They just went through cancer treatment, so many things, and they'll say that we helped them get through this tough time or currently helping them get through this tough time, and that just means the world to me. It makes me think we're doing something right if that's the case.
Yeah. Well, I think about my own podcast listening. I mean, so much of what I listen to is our theology podcast, and
Mm.
they're learning and teaching, and every now and then I just need a break from all of that, and
Yeah,
I just need to laugh, and I just need to listen to something that's not so serious. I need to hear Dusty talk about the moon or something.
right, right,
I
right.
just need something silly, and it really, I mean, you guys do, you minister to me, and it encourages me, and I think that there's something in that that all Christians can learn, that we don't always have to be serious. We can just make the world a better place. We can be fun. We can let people know that we can be lighthearted and just bring a smile to our workplace or our school or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It doesn't mean going out with a Bible and thumping people in the head with it. It means living your life in a way that brings honor and glory to God and being a bright light and, a positive influence out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me one of the things that I really personally benefit from by listening to comedians is to think through my own communication through
Mhm.
what you guys do. I think that there are some similarities between what preachers do and what comedians do. So
Yeah.
I would love to hear you talk about communication. Like, maybe you sit and listen to preachers and you think, "Man, I could teach them a thing or 2 about communication," or just people in Christians in general. So, like, what do you think that people could learn about communication from comedians?
Well, first of all, let me say preachers, I think there are a lot of similarities, but I'm so impressed with what you guys do because you have a new sermon every week, and we do the same material sometimes for years. And we complain about musicians who get to play the same songs their entire life, but we at least get to do our material for a couple of years before we have to move on, retire. You guys are coming up with a new act every week, so I'm very impressed with that. I don't know. I feel like this is a personal preference and conversation. Most of us could learn to edit better
Mm,
when we're sharing a story or sharing information. I find myself wanting them to kinda get to the crux of what they're having to say, and they're sharing a lot of details that aren't necessarily necessary. But, and then I guess just, let's all be honest and open with, what we're thinking and what we're feeling. Very often, comedians are just people who are pointing out what other people are thinking but haven't said, and I don't think we need to be out there, I guess, pointing out every bad thing about people. If you see, a woman on the street with some crazy hairdo, you don't need to necessarily point it out to her and tell her about it, but um, just be authentic and be your true self. I think it comes through in stand up comedy. It would probably be better if all of us were a little bit more authentic and not putting up a front.
yeah. And a couple of things there that's really interesting about the editing and just that I imagine that's the case that over time you kind of learn as you work on your bit, like well, I probably don't need this detail. I don't need that detail, or I need a little extra detail. And so you're able to sort of hone that just a little bit. I was listening to some people communicate this past week, and I was thinking a lot about, hey, we don't need to know all of these little details. But I think a lot of that has really been helped by listening to you guys talk about your act and just working on it over time. Are there any like that in particular, as people are sharing stories, what details are important, what details aren't important? I think we all struggle with trying to figure out how to edit ourselves, how to edit when we're telling a story so that we get to the point. Are there any tips that you would give somebody to know what details they should include and like what details they don't need in their stories?
Well, I don't know because a joke's probably a little bit different maybe, but, um, in a joke, you're just trying to get to the punchline
Yeah.
as quick as possible, and you just need enough details to make the punchline clear. And I guess in a story, there's a point to every story, so maybe, maybe it's the same principle where, um yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
You're asking me some tough questions.
Sorry, Brian. I didn't mean to throw you a curveball. But even that idea of honesty, I love, like you said, your comedy is very observational, and I think that's a lot of comedy, Seinfeld and different
Sure.
people that are observing, and it is interesting to think of that in terms of honesty and authenticity, and so often. People appreciate, I always say people appreciate hearing their thoughts come out of somebody else's mouth. And if we can say what everybody else is thinking, I think it really does. It builds a love for people. That's why one reason I love listening to you guys is like, oh yeah, they said what I was thinking or what I was afraid to say, and I think a
Yeah.
lot of us can learn from that.
Absolutely. That's what I love to see in stand-up comedy or, preaching or anything is when someone shares a thought that I either had or I was afraid I was the only one that was feeling that way or the only one that thought that way, and it just makes you feel good to be, more relatable. And, we have a young child. We're old parents. We have a young daughter. She's 3 years old, and the bedtime routine at our house is wild because she doesn't wanna go to bed like most toddlers, and it's just a big, zoo around here at night, and as our only child, we often wonder, "Are we doing something wrong? Is there something wrong with our child?" And I'm sure we are doing some things wrong, but then I'll be on scrolling through Instagram, and there'll be funny memes of parents. Once you get the algorithm, then you start getting more and more, and it'll be something that's so relatable to what we're dealing with, and it makes me laugh and feel good because I'm like, "Oh, no, this is something that almost all parents deal with."
Yeah. And sometimes social media can be the opposite. We can scroll through social media and it seems like everybody else has a perfect life because they're
Sure.
editing their life in that way and they're just showing the highlight reels. They're showing the great stuff and everybody's smiling, everybody's having a great day. And so it does feel good when somebody says, "Hey, my life doesn't look like Instagram. My life is a mess and people are struggling." And if we're just honest with people that way, I think we
Yeah.
do it builds a relationship, and I think a lot of Christians could build relationships even with their unbelieving neighbors just by being
Mhm.
honest and saying, "Hey, we think that following Jesus is great and it's wonderful, but it doesn't mean our life is perfect. It doesn't mean it's cookie cutter, and we've got just as many problems as anybody else does. It's just that Jesus is helping us deal with those." And if we
Mhm.
would be honest with people, it really would help us to build relationships with them.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and for me, I'm sure this is the same for you even as a minister, but I don't have all the answers. Not only do I have all the answers, I don't have most of the answers, to the questions that someone might ask me about my faith or the Bible, and sometimes I can think, "Well, I shouldn't even be talking about it because I'm just gonna, look dumb and be like a fraud," but, uh, that's okay. It's okay. We should be studying the word. I'm not saying that, but at the same time, it's okay not to have all the answers when
Yeah.
you're talking to people out there.
Yeah, and when you say that to people that, "Well, I don't have all the answers," that instantly builds a camaraderie. I think
Awesome.
sometimes we're afraid, of course, we're afraid that if we admit that we don't know something or that we struggle with something or we have a problem with something, we're afraid that people will reject us because of that. And we'll say, ah, well, you're dumb or you're weak or you're
Right.
whatever. And they'll walk away. But I've never seen that happen. I've never seen somebody have the courage to admit a struggle or, hey, we have this problem or my family or my parenting or whatever. I've
Mhm.
never heard somebody admit that and then people reject them. I've always seen, "Oh, me too. I also
Yeah.
have that problem," and it brings us closer to each other. So it's ironic that we're afraid that honesty is gonna push people away when honesty is actually what brings us together.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, and I guess that's a good lesson. Stand-up comedy is about being honest, and, that's how we should all live our lives.
Yeah, I've never really thought about that. Thank you for that because I've never really thought about comedy in that sense of honesty and authenticity. It reminds me of one of my favorite chapters of one of C.S. Lewis's books. He talks about in the Four Loves. He talks about friendship, and he said that friendship happens when two people see the same truth and they say, "Oh, I thought I was the only one. You see that
Mm,
truth as well." And when two people see the same truth, when they care about the same thing, when they have the same problem, it instantly makes us friends.
yeah, yeah, that's great.
Well, Brian,
That's
this has been really good. Would you mind sharing, where people can find you, find your comedy, or come see you live?
Yeah, if you wanna see me live on Sundays, you can come to Harpeth Hills Church of Christ in Brentwood, Tennessee, when I'm there, but you can go to my website, brianbatescomedy.com, and, all my tour dates on there. Wes, I got some good news and some bad news for you. The good news is I'm coming to Plano, Texas.
Oh, fantastic.
The bad news is it's on a Wednesday night,
Ah,
so, you can't really spread the word at your church to admit to
don't
go to a
don't come
comedy.
to Bible class. Go see Brian Bates.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So I am coming to Plano, Mic Drop Comedy Club on November 12th, I believe.
Cool.
But, yeah, like I said, it's a Wednesday night, so but, I got a lot of tour dates coming up all over the country. Um, Go to my website, brianbatescomedy.com to see those tour dates, or you can, follow me on social media. Brian Bates Comic, I think is my handle on most of my social medias.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, Brian, thanks for making time for this conversation. Thanks for what you're doing in the world. You really are making the world a better place.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thanks for being here. Thank you so much for listening to the Radically Christian Podcast. If you have just a moment, I would really appreciate if you would rate and review the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening. It really does help more people discover this content. Thank you again for listening, and I also want to thank the guests who join me each week and my McDermott Road Church family who helps make this podcast possible. Okay, now let's all go out and love like Jesus.